What you get when you ask the best Zwift racers in the world to race against each other in a points race on one of the most underrated and yet hardest courses on Zwift. I'm talking about the Richmond Cobble Climbs course that we did in the Zwift Racing League last Tuesday, featuring Libby Hill, 23rd Street, and the final climb to Governor, which is of course where the finish is. It was a star-studded field and one that was full of suffering. This one came down to the final climb on the final lap. You're going to want to stick around to see it. All right, let's jump right into this race. We actually start with quite an easy start before getting to the first climb. Now, this spells disaster because you know that this first effort up Libby Hill is going to be filthy. It's going to be max power outputs for like 1 minute. If you've seen Na's video already, you'll have seen he touched almost 11 watts per kilogram for 50 seconds to a minute on the very first lap on this climb you're about to see. And he launches from the back to try and get the fastest through segment and first across the line, of which he was on a mission tonight. He was trying to really clean up. Not that I knew any of that, of course. That's just from me watching this video. A really good one as well. So thanks for posting it, man. It's really cool to see the perspectives of other riders, and I really enjoy watching them. Now, I should say the key for me in this race was to try and get to the end with the best position possible. I wasn't necessarily trying to score points, but rather just survive. Getting to the second climb of 23rd Street, the group is obviously still massive at this point, and I was finding myself in around 20th or 30th position. Nothing really to write home about, but when everyone is so fresh, this is where the efforts do the most damage, particularly to me, as this isn't really my strong point. What is my strong point is, in the words of Captain America, I can do this all day. So by the time we get to lap 3 and 4, I will hope that the fatigue that set in brings everybody down somewhat to a similar level as myself. But you'll have to stick around to see how it plays out. Because as we finish the first lap, it's kind of a little bit of a stalemate. Like, the first 2 climbs have been done, and now everybody's looking at each other, waiting to see what happens next. We hit the second lap, and there's still a little bit of action at the front. People obviously sensing that if there's a chance they can get away, then why not? I mean, if you've got a chance to get a gap and get over Libby Hill with, a small advantage, then you'll pick up points there for yourself and for your team, and you'll have escaped the maximum power and wattages of some of the really strong riders of the race. Now, again, this wasn't really my game plan, but rather I was just trying to weather the storm as best as possible. The second time, on the second lap, I found myself a little bit further up the front, inside the top 20 this time. And I did notice that every time we finished an effort up each of these climbs, there was a real lull in proceedings. Hitting 23rd Street though, again, similar thing happened, although it was much more strung out, and you can see that now there was a few gaps appearing between riders. We're only 20 minutes into the race, but with all of these short sprint style efforts, 30 seconds to 60 seconds, you don't need a lot of time to do damage. So it all regrouped at the bottom of Governor, and I thought, ooh, I've got a ghost power up. Let's give this a go. And I could see there was a little breakaway of some strong riders off the front, and I thought this might be a good chance to have a little bridge if I can sneak away. And that I did. I got across to Niall and Jan, and we made a little bit of a gap, but not for very long. Getting to the false flat, it all came together. But looking back, this was the moment where the race really split apart. And it's maybe a combination of a few things. People not expecting that Governor Street would be, raced as intensely, given that there's another 2 laps left. But also it comes at a point where you're already a couple of minutes into making quite hard efforts. When you look back at Libby Hill and you see at what point you start making your first effort, you finish Libby Hill, you do 23rd Street, and then if you do Governor Street as well quite hard, which we did on this second lap, you actually total 5 or 6 minutes of work, where your normalized power, for me at least, was around 410 to 415 watts, which is a huge amount of work. If you do that every lap for 4 laps, you can start to see where the breaks can start to appear. All of a sudden, it's not just a race of big power, short power efforts, but it's now a race of durability over repeated 5-minute high intensity periods. And this is what I felt played into my hands a little bit as the race developed. I felt like I became stronger as the race got on, even if towards the end I did also start to struggle, but I did start to feel like I could do more as the race went on. Jumping ahead back to the next climb, I went early on Libby Hill to try and follow the strongest riders in the group, but there was absolutely no following them whatsoever. They got a good gap over the top, and I was just in the group behind picking up the pieces. Managed to get a small little gap into the bottom of 23rd Street. I did have a burrito, so didn't really have any advantage when it came to power-ups here, and I was blasted past by the small group I was in because of power-ups and because of supreme wattages. However, I managed to stay in that group just with the help of Hayden. We just about managed to get back onto the group of Nico, Jan, and, well, luckily get back to the front. Niall was in our group, and Ruben had a small gap at the end of this third lap. Now, I had a little push up Governor Street again, following a couple of moves and over the top, coming through the finish, and with 1 lap to go. But I was never really going to split the group. It was more just to see if the legs were still responding, which they were. Coming through, though, for the final lap, I did have a ghost power-up again. Now, I thought I would use it pretty early, considering we'd just come off the back of a big 5-minute effort again. So I sneakily used the ghost, and I managed to get a little gap straight away, just as Jan was saying that the race is a race full of power-ups. And yes, it was, and completely random ones, of course, but I did hear a couple of folk have pretty bad luck when it came to power-ups, and luckily, I think I got pretty good power-ups in the end, which probably helped me a little bit stay in the group. Now, my little attack went nowhere. That's no surprise. But we got to the bottom of Libby Hill just after a bit of shenanigans with more ghost power-ups being used. But the problem with the ghost power-up is it's not a real ghost, in my opinion. I think you can still see the rider and their shadow on the floor. So if you're aware of it and you know that people could potentially have a ghost, I don't think it's worth having it in the race, really. But there we go. It adds a different element. So we hit Libby Hill for the final time. And I'm feeling nervous because I know I've got to go early again to prevent me from potentially slipping off the back of this group. Committing early means it strings the group out. It makes people obviously commit early as well. And also means that I have a better chance of holding on to some wheels over the top, which thankfully I do. This group though fractures instantly. Over the top of the climb, a breakaway forms of Jan, Niall, and Ruben. And quite frankly, they did a really good job to get away where they did, because everybody, I think, was pretty much on their last legs. I was now in a group that included Zach, Hayden, and Nico, and I held on by the absolute skin of my teeth on 23rd Street. I was in a world of pain there, just trying to maintain and stay in the draft. Now, I don't know whether it was luck or what, but I managed to pick up an aero power-up at that banner and stay in this group until the bottom of Governor, which is where I noticed Hayden had not given up his chase. He'd just been dropped off one of the previous climbs, but he was still coming back with his absolute raw wattage. Now, hitting the climb, I thought, I think I'm going to have to go early here because I'm going to roll the dice and hope that everybody else is as tired as I am. And if I go early, it might just pay off. And it also hopefully prevents Hayden from being able to do anything. Sorry, Hayden. Anyway, we get halfway up this climb. And there's a flurry of power-ups. Zach hits the draft. Nico hits the burrito with a load of power, which is something that I can't respond to, and I also can't draft. So he gets over the top and buries himself on the final fall flat stretch. I'm now in a battle with Zach. He comes around me and smells blood in the water. I hit my aero power up there and then because I know if I don't stay in this draft, it's just going to be a drag race from here for the last 400 meters to the finish. And I didn't want that. I wanted to be on that wheel. I wanted to be in the draft so that I could at least have something to maybe come around him at the end. And what do you know? It comes down to the final 100 meters where I just stand and give it everything I've got to eke around Avatar and just nip the 5th place on the line. What a race that was, and what a finish. It was incredible to be a part of, and these guys are pushing me like I've never been pushed before. GG's. It was a fantastic race. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and stay tuned for more.